We are up for a crazy Atlantic hurricane season. It may be even worse than that of 2005, the year that brought us Hurricane Katrina. That one took 1,392 lives and cost the country over $100 billion. Experts predict there will be between 17 to 25 total named storms. Some of these storms are about to become hurricanes, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour or higher. We're already seeing storms sweep across the country, bringing dangers like tornadoes, flooding, and hail. You gotta thank the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, for this. This complicated term has to do with El Niño and La Niña, the two giant forces that basically shape our world. Normally, winds in the Pacific Ocean blow west along the equator, moving warm water from South America towards Asia. This warm water is replaced by cold water rising from the depths of the Pacific. But during El Niño and La Niña, this usual pattern is messed up. El Niño is the warm phase of the ENSO cycle. During El Niño, the equatorial winds weaken, causing warm water to shift back towards the west coast of the Americas. This means less cold water rises to the surface. The weather in northern parts of the US and Canada become drier and warmer because of it. But there are wetter conditions in southern states. In the Atlantic, El Niño weakens hurricane seasons, and it ramps up hurricane activity in the central and eastern Pacific. In Africa, it brings more rain to East Africa but less to southern Africa, West Africa, and parts of the Sahara. La Niña is the cold phase of the ENSO cycle. During this phase, the westward winds along the equator in the Pacific are stronger than usual, and they push more warm water towards Asia. And because of it, colder, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface along the Americas' west coast. These colder Pacific waters push the jet stream northward, giving us drier weather in the southern US, but wetter and colder conditions in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. La Niña also brings warmer winters to the southern US and cooler than normal temperatures to the north. La Niña usually calms hurricane activity in the Pacific, but intensifies it in the Atlantic. In 2023, El Niño was in charge, and it took most storms up before they got to the US. But this year, we've switched to La Niña, and this lady brings us colder water in the Pacific and a pattern that lets storms move a little farther west and reach the Caribbean. And when they get there, they can easily move into the Gulf and affect Florida and other states. The upcoming intense Atlantic hurricane season also has to do with a strong monsoon season in West Africa. It creates moisture and waves off Africa's coast and can travel along the Atlantic and spur hurricanes. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from the 1st of June to the 30th of November, and most activity happens between mid-August and mid-October. Since the 1950s, tropical cyclones have been given names to make it easier for meteorologists to inform the public about them. You're more likely to remember that Leslie is coming than Hurricane X34D is on the way, right? So there are 20 names on the alphabetical list this year, from Alberto to Beryl to Valerie and William. Let's hope it won't get as terrible as the Galveston hurricane. The most fatal natural disaster in U.S. history hit Texas in the year 1900. A Category 4 hurricane smashed into Galveston, demolishing over 3,600 buildings with winds over 135 miles per hour. It took the lives of between 6,000 and 12,000 people. One of the reasons it became so fatal was poor communication policy. Days before the disaster, it was clear to a professional weather forecaster that the storm was moving west. But the Weather Bureau in Washington predicted it would go over Florida and up to New England, which was way off. The Bureau was just 10 years old then, so hurricane science in the US wasn't very advanced. Cuban scientists were excellent at tracking storms because their region is so prone to them. So they knew it was heading towards the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, the director of the Weather Bureau was so jealous that the Cuban forecasters were better than the American ones that he cut off the flow of information from Cuba and made it difficult for local forecasters to issue warnings without going through Washington. In the days before the storm hit, the chief observer in Galveston began to suspect that Washington's forecast was wrong and tried to warn the city, but it was too late. The hurricane left Galveston in ruins. After this hurricane, the Weather Bureau started improving communication both internationally and within the U.S. The officials in charge are doing everything possible to improve forecasts, support the people, and help the affected areas recover more easily after the hurricanes hit. They're going to try new forecast models to predict tropical cyclones getting stronger, help emergency and water managers prepare for potential flooding, and protect people and infrastructure. Coastal weather buoys in the tropical western Atlantic and Caribbean have been upgraded, and new drifters and sail drones, underwater gliders, and a lightweight drop sonde will provide real-time data. There are also some things you can do to ensure your safety before, during, and after a hurricane. If you live in a hurricane-prone area, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you must always be prepared before the high storm season. Make up a family disaster plan that will outline your actions during an emergency. Map out several evacuation routes in case your primary one is blocked, and decide on a meeting place if you get separated. You can arrange drills to teach family members how to shut off water, gas, and electricity, and even make sure the youngest knows how to call emergency services. Pack a disaster kit that will be ready to go at a moment's notice. It should include essentials like food, water, a first aid kit, and flashlights to last at least 72 hours on your own. You can buy a generator to make sure you have electricity in case of a power outage until the power returns. Keep it in a secure place, away from rain and rising water, with proper ventilation. You're also going to need self-powered radios and flashlights. If you can, add a safe room to your house that's strengthened to withstand high winds with reinforced concrete ceiling, floor, and walls. Make sure you have enough canned and non-perishable food and bottled water for at least 3 days. When the storm is about to hit, head north to get away from it, where it will be much weaker by the time it gets there. It's much safer to keep your family and pets together away from the storm than trying to ride it out at home. Try to go in one car if possible. Always follow local evacuation orders, especially if you're in a mobile home. Fill up your gas tank and give yourself plenty of time to get out. Never leave your pets behind. Debris, floodwaters, or flying objects can be dangerous for them. If you're staying put during a storm, you need a safe spot for you, your family, and your pets. This place shouldn't have any windows or skylights. If you're hiding at home, close all interior doors and secure the exterior ones. Quickly find an interior room with strong walls and no windows, like a bathroom or closet. If your home isn't safe, look for a community shelter. Get to your shelter at least 2 hours before the storm hits so it doesn't catch you outside. Bring a battery-powered radio with extra batteries for updates every 15 to 30 minutes. Never leave your shelter even if it seems calm, as conditions can get worse quickly, especially if you're in the eye of the storm. For extra protection, lie on the floor under something sturdy like a table. Don't use electric appliances, phones, or showers during the storm. Don't leave your shelter until you get the official all clear from the authorities. Be careful. There will be many hazards outside.
Welcome to the Spirit of Discovery cruise ship, which will take you on an unforgettable sea voyage around the Canary Islands. The azure endless ocean, delicious food, the highest service, premium cabins, and a terrible nightmare that you will probably remember for the rest of your life. This is exactly how one luxury trip of the Saga Cruises Company ended last year. Instead of relaxing during the cruise, passengers felt fear and horror, and even had health problems. And that's why. On October 24th, the Spirit of Discovery liner started a 2-week cruise around the Canary Islands. There were about 1,500 people on board. About 1,000 were passengers, and the rest were crew members. The first week went great, but then the liner encountered a serious problem called nature. There were strong winds and big waves. The captain decided to return to the UK ahead of time, but the decision was made too late. The ship was caught in a severe storm in the Bay of Biscay. A powerful wind with a force of 11 points hit the vessel. To make it easier for you to understand, the 11-point wind is able to tear out trees together with roots, destroy residential buildings, and plunge entire cities into chaos. Such a storm is rare, but Spirit of Discovery was unlucky enough to get into its epicenter. 11 points is the penultimate place on the Beaufort scale, which determines the wind rating. The most powerful storm has 12 points, and this is a hurricane. The wind reached a speed of 65 miles per hour, which is about the same as the average speed of a car on a highway. Not only did it push the Spirit of Discovery, but it also raised huge waves 25 feet high. Just imagine a wall of water the height of a 3-story building collapsing on a lone ocean liner. At that moment, the captain sent a message to all the passengers through the cabin speakers so that no one left their place. And his voice sounded worried enough. All the passengers had to lie down and hold on tight. According to the witnesses' words, the ship remained caught in the storm for about 15 hours. They held on with all their might so as not to crash into the walls and floor. All this time, tables were flying around the ship, dishes were breaking, furniture was moving all over the cabins. The waves smashed windows, partitions, and doors. Some people were knocked down because they couldn't hold on for so long. The storm hurled the passengers from ceiling to floor, from wall to wall. The ship's crew turned the dining room into a medical area to provide assistance to those who had been hurt. Despite the difficult and terrible conditions, the ship's team did a great job. They regularly informed passengers about the current situation and tried to calm everyone down. There was no panic and chaos on board. When the storm finally ended, the ship continued its journey and finally reached land, where medics urgently evacuated 8 passengers to the hospital. One of them was never able to survive this storm. It's good the ship didn't meet a rogue wave during the storm. This is a natural phenomenon that can appear during a storm and even in still water. It's a giant wave with a height of 60 feet. Like a 6-story house, it collapses onto a ship with incredible speed and capsizes it. And then the wave suddenly disappears. This is no joke. A similar wave has been recorded in the Gulf Stream off of Charleston, South Carolina. It's scary to get in its way. Now, let's go back to the past to remember one of the most terrible maritime tragedies. No, we're not talking about the Titanic. We'll talk about the Greek liner Laconia, which set sail from the English port of Southampton on December 19, 1963, with more than 600 people on board. However, just 3 days later, a terrible tragedy happened to the ship in the boundless waters of the Atlantic. At 11 p.m., in the barbershop hall, an electrical malfunction occurred. The problem led to a fire, which quickly spread to other rooms. The crew couldn't cope with it, since the fire was spreading too fast. The ship's team turned on the fire alarm, but there was no command to leave the vessel. Only 2 hours later, the captain ordered the passengers to evacuate. All this time, people were either relaxing in their cabins or enjoying a party in the ballroom. The crew was probably trying to put out the fire without causing panic. However, when the situation became critical, the evacuation began. People panicked and ran to the lifeboats, but many didn't manage to get inside. One of them was John Morris. He survived this catastrophe and shared his memories of how he put his family in a lifeboat while he stayed on board the ship. He didn't even have a life jacket. Since there was nowhere to go, the ship's crew opened a bar so that people could relax a little. However, at that moment, boilers began to explode inside the ship, and it became clear the vessel wouldn't stay afloat for too long. John Morris decided to jump into the water right in his tuxedo. As soon as he was overboard, he grabbed onto a piece of wooden deck cargo and swam as far away from the ship as he could. The giant liner could sink at any moment, and when such a huge object goes down to the seabed, it forms a water funnel that pulls along everything around. Rescuers arrived at the scene sometime later. Fortunately, John Morris's pregnant wife and young son were alive, but his mother-in-law unfortunately didn't survive the disaster, like many other people that day. Of course, after this incident, the Greek Ministry of Merchant Marine initiated a thorough investigation. For 2 years, they collected information from passengers and the captain, studied the technical characteristics of the ship, and eventually came to certain conclusions. According to them, the ship's crew gave the evacuation order too late. Not all passengers were able to get into lifeboats, but half of those boats remained on board because of the chaos that prevailed during the evacuation. Several officers of the liner were accused of negligence, but the captain and his first mate received the most criticism. As for John Morris, he stated that he felt himself under protection that day. Another unusual story happened on a cruise ship relatively recently. Spoiler alert, the ship didn't sink, there was no evacuation, and the weather was good. However, for many passengers, this journey became a real challenge. Imagine that you've been working for a long time and saving up money to go on your dream trip on the Celebrity Mercury cruise ship in the Caribbean. You arrive in South Carolina, from where the ship begins its journey. You get on board, looking forward to a week's rest. At first, everything is fine. People are having fun, chefs are cooking delicious dishes, and beautiful daytime landscapes turn into night parties. But then suddenly, many passengers start throwing up. Someone is in a hurry to go to the toilet, and someone stays and vomits right in the halls. The cruise turns into chaos. More and more people feel terrible because of unknown poisoning. You also visited the restaurant and eaten seafood, but fortunately, the disease has avoided you, which can't be said for more than 400 other passengers. Almost every 1 in 4 people on board face gastrointestinal problems. There were almost 2,000 people, and a quarter of them are in bad condition. Crew members do endless cleaning. They wash the deck, give people nausea pills, and ask them not to leave the cabin till the illness passes. The captain sends several samples ashore to determine what caused the poisoning. Unfortunately, the cruise is already ruined, and all the passengers have unpleasant memories. So the company organizing the trip issues certificates that can be used on future cruises. It's not the most pleasant experience, but it's still better than nothing. Now, imagine if, instead of just feeling sick, people got infected with some kind of bacterium that would turn them into zombies. It would be much more exciting and scary. Now, do you think you could survive on such a ship full of zombies? And how would you do that? Tell me about it in the comments.
The snowpack over your head splits in two right in front of your eyes and starts tumbling down in the frozen slope to its resting place far, far below. Anything in its way is crushed under the immense mass of snow and debris. You're witnessing an avalanche, one of the most dangerous natural disasters. But what if I tell you about another kind of avalanche, no less blood-chilling than the mountain one? And the most bizarre thing about it is that it occurs underwater. Underwater avalanches are powerful and disastrous natural phenomena, often much more dangerous than land ones. They have the potential to wreak havoc on the entire planet, leading to catastrophic consequences. The most alarming thing? They occur all the time under the surface of the ocean, impossible to see, predict, and extremely difficult to measure. Such avalanches can get 100 times larger than land ones, and they pose a great risk to the world's communications, capable of leaving the entire planet without the internet. But we'll talk about it a bit later. First, let's go 60,000 years back into the past. We're near the northwest coast of Africa, ready to witness the colossal scale and devastating impact of a ginormous underwater avalanche. It started as a quite small underwater landslide in the Agadir Canyon. At first, it was just 0.35 cubic miles of material, but in no time, this mass increased more than 100 times in size while traveling across the Atlantic Ocean floor. As the avalanche sped up and grew, it picked up gravel, sand, rocks, and mud. It carved a devastating path through one of the world's largest submarine canyons, wiping out all forms of animal and plant life on its way. The disastrous flow was so powerful that it literally eroded a 250-mile stretch of the canyon, cutting hundreds of feet into its sides and damaging a total area of 1,740 square miles. That's the area of more than 3.5 New York cities. As for the force of the flow, it was so immense that it propelled massive boulders up the canyon walls to heights of up to 430 feet. Before scientists discovered the evidence of this catastrophic event, they had seriously underestimated the scale of destruction caused by submarine avalanches. By the way, these devastating catastrophes can start not only far away in the ocean, but also at estuaries. Let's go back to 14 January 2020 and see for ourselves. A turbidity current, a rapid, downhill flow of water containing a lot of sediment, rushed more than 680 miles from the Congo River estuary in the deep sea. This current appeared due to two factors: terrible flooding along the Congo River in late December 2019 and unusually large spring tides. This resulted in an avalanche of sand and mud. Its volume was equivalent to 1/3 of all the sediment produced annually by all the rivers in the world. This sediment avalanche accelerated, increasing in speed from 17 feet per second in the upper part of the Congo Canyon to 26 feet per second when it reached the end of the channel, almost 700 miles away from the coastline. This route made it the longest avalanche of sediment ever measured on our planet. 2 days later, the flow reached the deep ocean. The avalanche broke 2 seabed telecommunication cables, cutting internet data speeds all the way across West, Central, and South Africa. Now, before this disaster, scientists considered that measuring powerful deep-sea avalanches was impractical. But the sediment flow in the Congo Canyon could be monitored directly, finally allowing researchers to assess how major river floods connected to the deep sea. They also concluded that how often underwater avalanches occurred depended on where the observer was. Seafloor canyons that are close to river mouths can experience several tiny avalanches per year. Other systems, far from river discharges like the Agadir Canyon, can only have one monster of an avalanche every 10,000 years or so. You're likely wondering, what can trigger an avalanche under the surface of the ocean? Well, earthquakes, typhoons, high tides, river floods, and even volcanic eruptions. And due to our changing climate, such events become more and more frequent and intense. At the same time, these triggers don't mean that an avalanche is bound to happen, nor do they relate to the scale of the event. See for yourself. In 1755, a powerful earthquake hit the coast of Portugal, wiping out large parts of Lisbon. Tens of thousands of people lost their lives during that disaster, but it only triggered a tiny underwater avalanche. And in 1929, a large earthquake off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, triggered the largest underwater avalanche ever recorded. The flow traveled at a speed of 42 miles per hour, carrying boulders, sand, and mud. It snapped 11 seabed cables on its journey downhill. The avalanche was so powerful, it produced a tsunami that claimed the lives of 28 people along the coastline. Now, submarine avalanches are totally invisible because they happen deep under the ocean surface, which makes them extremely hard to study. But we must find a way because these flows are super important. They transport sediments, nutrients, and even pollutants across the ocean floor. So, a research team from Liverpool decided to unravel this mystery. Over the last 40 years, they've collected more than 300 samples from the ocean floor. Combined with seismic and bathymetric data, which is a fancy word for ocean mapping, they managed to reconstruct a massive submarine avalanche. It was the first time an underwater avalanche of this size was mapped out. An even cooler thing, the event itself started off pretty modestly, but it quickly evolved into a colossal avalanche that grew to more than 650 feet tall. To put that into perspective, imagine a skyscraper-sized avalanche zooming from Liverpool to London. cutting a trench 100 feet deep and 9 miles wide. Then it spread out over an area bigger than the UK, covering it with several feet of sand and mud. That's like burying a whole country. These findings are actually a big deal because they show that even a small underwater landslide can turn into something massive and super destructive. But that's not the worst. Think about undersea internet cables, which are essential for global communication. There are more than 550 active seafloor cables around the world. Their combined length is a whopping 870,000 miles. That's enough to wrap around our planet 35 times. When a submarine avalanche breaks seafloor cables, the effects are usually super expensive and devastating. For example, in 2006, an earthquake in Taiwan triggered underwater avalanches that cut loads of seafloor cables connecting Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. The largest internet operator in China had a 90% loss of traffic to the USA at the peak of the event. As for Taiwan itself, it experienced between 74 to 100% loss in traffic to neighboring islands. So now you probably get why we need to learn more about this natural phenomenon. Luckily, researchers at Tulane University have found a way to study it in 3D. Previous studies only looked at submarine avalanches in 2D, which didn't give the full picture of how they actually behaved. The new research focused on how underwater flows interacted with mini basins, natural features on the ocean floor that look like shallow bowls. Despite being called mini, these bowls can be huge, up to 4 square miles. When turbidity currents flow into these mini basins, they don't just stop. No, they hit the far side and curl back around like water eddies in a stream. These swirling flows move the sediment around before it settles on the ocean floor. The size of the mini basin and the speed of the flow can change how the current behaves. If the basin is big and the current is slow, it starts to fill up with sediment. But if you crank up the flow speed or shrink the basin, the current starts to overflow, spilling over the basin. To study all this, the researchers created a mini version of a mini basin in a pool and used different speeds of flow to simulate turbidity currents. They even made their own sediment mixtures to see how different sizes of particles would behave. In the end, they managed to mimic real-life ocean conditions, but on a smaller, manageable scale. Pretty cool, huh?
It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis like the one in 2004 are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises: could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground.
Back in the day, from 774 to 775, Earth got hit with a mega blast of radiation. This crazy burst of energy left its mark. 3 rings from that year show way too high levels of radioactive stuff. But what exactly caused it? Scientists are inclined to think that the reason was a solar flare. Some folks think maybe a massive supernova caused the radiation blast. But astronomer Phil Plait says that if that had been the case, it would have had to be less than 1,000 light years away and would have had been crazy bright. But there's no record of that happening. No bright, shiny Death Star in sight. After looking at the radioactive carbon and beryllium in tree rings, scientists ruled out a bunch of other possibilities. At first, they considered that it was a smash-up between neutron stars or a neutron star and a black hole. These types of crashes produce a super quick blast of gamma rays without any light show, which lines up best with the evidence. But these kinds of collisions are super rare. Plait thinks it's kinda unlikely that this is the answer. He figures we should only see one of these events in our galaxy about once every million years. So having one just 1,200 years ago seems pretty wild. Scientists are seriously worried about these rare events. If one happened closer to Earth, it could seriously mess up life on our planet. Even if it was thousands of light years away, a similar event today could cause chaos with all the fancy electronic systems we've come to rely on. So it's a good thing those gamma ray bursts are so rare, because if they were more common, Earth might be in for a rough ride. You may think that if our planet could withstand mega radiation blasts, it can easily withstand something less frightening. Let's say grasshoppers. Sorry to say that, but it's not exactly true. Back in 1874, during a hot summer in Kansas, things took a strange turn. Grasshoppers, or should I say locusts, invaded the Great Plains like nobody's business. They came down like a storm, blanketing houses, trees, and even poor trains passing by. These bugs were on a mission to cause chaos. Farmers had to scramble to protect their wells and just about anything else worth saving. Locusts landed everywhere, wreaking havoc on everything in sight. Even poor sheep lost their wool. Locusts even stripped paint off wagons and handles off pitchforks. This is how destructive they were. Livestock tried to fight back by eating them, but there were just too many of these insects. That year, those critters caused about $200 million in crop damage. The locust invasion was so tough, even the US Army stepped in to help. In the end, locusts began to disappear, sparing the plains from further devastation. Natural disasters can be even more unexpected than radiation blasts from space and locust invasions. Check this out. Back in June 2017, a reindeer herder up in northwest Siberia was minding their own business when they suddenly heard a crazy loud blast and saw smoke shooting up from the ground. If that happened to me, I'd need to change my pants. Sorry. Later on, they found this huge hole that was like 23 feet wide and nearly 65 feet deep and was surrounded by chunks of ice and dirt. It turned out that there were over 17 such black holes in the area. They were filled with peaty water and shrouded in mystery. Some folks thought those were sinkholes. Others were sure they were left by top-secret device tests or even a bunch of meteorites. Now, the latest idea is that these holes are actually craters caused by the Arctic warming up and melting the frozen ground. The theory states that as the ground thaws, gas pockets trapped beneath the surface burst through, creating such dramatic holes. Apparently, these eerie craters have been showing up in specific spots in Siberia where ancient geological faults have been leaking out hot natural gas for ages. Combine that with some leftover methane from old lake sediments, and you've got a recipe for some explosive surprises as the planet heats up. Not scared yet? All right, maybe you're afraid of darkness, huh? If so, you wouldn't like it back in 536. It's the year when the world went through a crazy 18-month period of darkness. A mysterious fog covered Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, blocking out the sun and causing chaos. It was like the Dark Ages, but for real. It turns out that the main culprit behind this fog was a volcanic eruption in Iceland. This eruption spread ash across the northern hemisphere, causing temperatures to drop and crops to fail. People were freezing and starving. It was a mess. Historians from back in the day even talked about how weird it was. The sun looked like the moon. Summers were freezing cold, and even China had summer snow. It was all because of the volcanic ash blocking out the sun. And to make things even worse, this period of darkness sparked the beginning of the bubonic plague in 541. Talk about a rough time to be alive. Let's go back to Siberia real quick. Back in 1908, way out in the wilds of Siberia, an asteroid dropped for an unexpected visit. Today, we know it as the Tunguska asteroid, but it didn't get its name instantly. Local folks only caught a glimpse of the show. A bright fireball streaking across the sky, followed by a massive boom. Trees went flying, fires blazed, and animals weren't too happy about it either. But since the area was so remote, not many folks took notice. For almost 2 decades, nobody bothered to check out the Tunguska site. People had too much on their plates back then. But then, scientists finally made it out there and found evidence of the asteroid's shenanigans. Later in expeditions, they found some spacey microparticles. Fast forward to now, and NASA has a whole planetary defense thing going on. They even sent a mission to test out asteroid deflecting tech. Because who knows when the next cosmic rock will come knocking on our door, right? In the middle of the 19th century, there was one more epic solar storm called the Carrington Event. It may not sound like a big deal to you, but it had pretty rough consequences. The next day after the storm, Earth was hit with this insane geomagnetic storm that threw telegraphs off the rails and brought auroras to the tropics. And it's the place where they normally never show up. Turns out, all this space weather madness started with weird stuff happening on the sun's surface, like sunspots. From these spots, solar flares and other crazy electromagnetic stuff can pop out and mess with our technology. Massive solar storms like this one can shoot out from the sun at speeds of up to 1,800 miles per second. They can contain billions of tons of solar material, complete with a sassy little magnetic field that loves to mess with Earth's magnetic field when they meet. Now, listen closely. We're getting close to the next solar maximum in 2025, so it's a good time to check out the history of the worst solar storms, like the Carrington event, and take notice. Imagine if a similar storm hit today. An internet apocalypse, anyone? Businesses would be sent offline and we'd be facing some serious damages. Luckily, these mega solar storms don't happen very often. But hey, space weather is tricky to predict, so who knows when the next one will hit?
The Boxing Day tsunami, Indonesia. An undersea earthquake starts in the morning. Its tremors cause a series of tsunami waves. The largest reaches the height of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Unzen volcano mega tsunami. A powerful volcanic eruption triggers a landslide from a 4,000-year-old lava dome. It sweeps through the city of Shimabara and reaches the sea, setting off a mega tsunami. The Vajont Dam mega tsunami, Italy. A landslide drags 9 billion cubic feet of forest, soil, and rock into the lake. A dark wall of water covers the sky over a tiny village at the bottom of the Vajont Dam. Then, with a deafening roar, the wave overtops the edge of the dam, taking out everything in its path. Mount St. Helens mega tsunami, USA. As the volcano erupts, the upper 1,500 feet of Mount St. Helens collapses into a massive landslide. Part of this avalanche plunges down into nearby Spirit Lake, which splashes the lake waters into a series of waves almost as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Alaska's Lituya Bay tsunami. A landslide caused by an earthquake creates a mega wave. It surges over the headland and washes away trees, plants, and soil down to bedrock. Molokai, Hawaii. A third of the East Molokai volcano caves in and collapses into the Pacific Ocean. This causes a tsunami the size of the second tallest building in the world, Shanghai Tower. The waves reach Mexico and California. The Yucatan asteroid tsunami. The asteroid, which is rumored to have wiped out dinosaurs, strikes the Yucatan Peninsula. It creates a mega tsunami, the largest in Earth's history. The first wave's almost twice bigger than the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. Hurricane Mitch. Mitch forms in the western Caribbean Sea. Soon it strengthens to become the 8th most powerful Atlantic hurricane ever. The storm pours 4 inches of rain per hour for 2 days in Honduras. It causes terrible mudslides and floods. Hurricane Allen. Rare and extremely powerful, the storm is one of the few to reach Category 5, the highest possible. It causes more than $2 billion in damage. The Great Hurricane. After tearing down Barbados, the storm moves on. It strips the bark off the trees growing on Martinique and St. Lucia and travels further. This horrific natural disaster lasts for 6 days. Hurricane Dorian. It's the most powerful tropical cyclone to hit the Bahamas. The hurricane flattens most of the structures on the islands and sweeps them into the sea. Hurricane Wilma. The storm occurs in the Caribbean Sea near Jamaica and heads to the west. 2 days later, it gathers enough power to turn into the most intense hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Ocean. Hurricane Patricia. A regular storm develops a well-defined eye and turns into a Category 5 hurricane within a mere 24 hours. At one point, it travels faster than a Ferrari moving at its top speed. It makes Patricia the world's most intense tropical cyclone ever recorded. Kamchatka earthquake. It happens in the early morning 80 miles away from the shores of Kamchatka. The earth tremors produce a tsunami. The first 2 waves are catastrophic, up to 60 feet high. The third one's much weaker. Valparaiso earthquake, Chile. It happens at about 5 a.m. along the boundary of 2 tectonic plates. The tsunami, triggered by the earthquake, wipes out 620 miles of Chile's coastline. Tohoku earthquake, Japan. The first earth tremors start at a great underwater depth. The earthquake is so strong it moves Japan's main island. It shifts the planet on its axis by up to 10 inches and increases its rotation speed. The disaster also triggers a tsunami with 133-foot high waves that travel 6 miles inland. Indian Ocean earthquake, Sumatra. A rupture along two tectonic plates sets off an undersea earthquake. It begins at about 8 a.m. near northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It makes the planet vibrate nearly a half inch and sets off earthquakes all over the world up to Alaska. Good Friday earthquake, Alaska. The most powerful earthquake recorded in North America lasts for 4 minutes and 38 seconds. A 600-mile-long crack causes terrible landslides and a 27-foot tsunami. Areas 200 miles away get raised by 30 feet. Other places permanently drop 8 feet. Valdivia, Chile. The Great Chilean Earthquake starts in the afternoon and lasts for no less than 10 minutes. The disaster affects an area the size of California. It triggers tsunamis that reach the shore of Hawaii, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. The average tornado usually lasts less than 10 minutes, but there are exceptions. El Reno tornado. It's considered the world's largest tornado based on width. At its peak, the twister reaches 2.5 miles across. The Perryville tornado, U.S. It occurs at about 2 a.m. and starts with snapping hardwood trees and breaking down stone constructions. Then the whirlwind becomes stronger. It levels 2-story buildings, flips and tosses cars as if they were toys. Bridge Creek Moore tornado. When the twister gets into the town of Bridge Creek, its width is at its peak, 1 to 1.5 miles. The wind speed of the tornado reaches more than 300 miles per hour. This natural disaster causes $1 billion in damage. Manitoba, Canada. An outstanding tornado rages for nearly 3 hours. It breaks tons of trees and utility poles, damages roads and farmhouses, but miraculously misses every town on its path. Tri-State tornado, U.S. The world's longest-lasting single tornado travels 220 miles through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. The average tornado's path is usually no longer than 5 miles. Tupelo, Gainesville, U.S. An outbreak that consists of at least 12 single tornadoes wipes out everything on its way. The accompanying rainstorms also trigger severe flash floods that make matters even worse. Valjean landslide, Italy. At 10 p.m., a landslide with a volume of 100 Great Pyramids of Giza breaks off from the top of Monte Toc. It falls into the Valjean Dam reservoir, producing a tsunami wave taller than the Golden Gate Bridge. Yunnan, China. An avalanche of rocks, stones, and mud, so big it could fill up Sydney Harbor, forms a dam on the Jinsha River. The Hida River, Japan. Triggered by a rainstorm, 300,000 Olympic swimming pools of debris flows down before getting stopped by another, earlier landslide. Along the way, the landslide sweeps 2 buses off the road. Peru. A rock slide dams the Rio Montanero, a long river running through the center of Peru. The whole process takes no more than 3 minutes, which means the landslide moves at a speed of up to 87 miles per hour. It also leaves a trail of debris 5 miles long. The Usoy Dam, Tajikistan. Set off by a magnitude 7.4 earthquake, the rockslide falls into the Murghab River and blocks its flow. That's how the Usoy Dam, one of the tallest in the world, appears. Mount St. Helens, USA. At 8:30 a.m., after much buildup, a volcanic vent finally gives way and sets off a catastrophic eruption, which makes the entire north side of Mount St. Helens fall away. It's the world's largest recorded landslide. North Bonneville, U.S. In the middle of the 15th century, a great earthquake occurs. An incredible amount of debris rushes down from Table Mountain. It covers more than 5 square miles and blocks the Columbia River with a dam 200 feet high and 3.5 miles long. Hey, can you lift a truck with your hands? No? Shocker. But let me introduce you to nature's original strongman, the ocean. which casually tossed 700-ton boulders around like they were pebbles during a mega tsunami that hit Africa thousands of years ago. This wasn't just a bad day at the beach. This mega tsunami was so powerful, it made the 2004 Indonesian and 2011 Japanese tsunamis look like kiddie pool splashes. Now, to give you an idea of how terrifying regular tsunamis already are, the Japan tsunami produced waves 133 feet tall. The Indian Ocean tsunami was slightly smaller, but it took over 200,000 lives across many countries. Now imagine something way worse. You see, for a long time, scientists thought waves that big were just science fiction. But then they found these enormous boulders, massive chunks of rock, flung far inland, and did the math. It turns out only waves around 800 feet tall could have pulled off that kind of rocky vandalism. And the culprit? A volcano that literally fell apart into the ocean and triggered one of the most powerful tsunamis Earth has ever seen. Usually, tsunamis are blamed on underwater earthquakes, tectonic plates getting into slap fights. But volcanoes? Oh, they've got tsunami potential too. In 1883, for example, a volcano in Indonesia named Krakatoa erupted for 6 months non-stop until it exploded, and the explosion was heard all the way in Australia. This triggered many tsunamis, some almost 100 feet tall. Still, that was more like a toe dip compared to the full cannonball from the mega tsunami. Back in ancient times, the volcano that crumbled during the mega tsunami was huge, and it didn't just fall apart. It lost a chunk that was 10 times the size of Mount Everest. 10 Mount Everests. It was like the Earth wanted to see what would happen if we threw a mountain into the ocean just for fun. It was so massive that when the entire side of the volcano belly flopped into the Atlantic, it created waves that could cover the Statue of Liberty 3 times. It also destroyed an island more than 30 miles away. The volcano behind this real-life Michael Bay scene was called Fogo, located on, you guessed it, Fogo Island. This island is basically just a whole single volcano that rose from the sea thanks to a magma hotspot, a place in the ocean where a lot of magma escapes and erupts like an underwater volcano. Over time, this magma cooled and stacked up like pancakes until, voila, after 7 major eruptions, the island popped out of the ocean like it was playing peekaboo. Surprise, it's a volcano. But Fogo's dramatic entrance was also a ticking time bomb. You see, the more a volcano grows, the heavier it gets, and if there's not enough magma inside it to support it, the whole thing can just collapse. Sometimes it doesn't take much. A minor earthquake, some erosion, or just a poor foundation made of soft sediment can trigger a collapse. It's like a really tall guy trying to balance over a bunch of marbles. Fogo had all the bad luck ingredients: too tall, too heavy, and built on squishy ground. And it gets worse. As the volcano grows heavier, it starts squishing the magma underneath. That lava can't rise, so it just simmers down there, slowly thickening like soup left on a burner for too long. Gases build up, pressure increases, and eventually, kaboom! It's the volcanic version of eating too many burritos and then trying to hold in a sneeze. This massive pressure and imbalance can trigger what's called a flank collapse, which is science speak for oops, half the volcano just fell into the ocean. That's what happened with Fogo. Most of the volcanic islands that form this way are long gone, but Fogo is still very much alive and kicking. In fact, it last erupted in 2014, and considering that it goes off every 20 years, maybe don't travel to Fogo Island in around 2034. For the longest time, scientists believe only big, bulky volcanic islands could collapse like this. But new research says that even smaller, skinnier guys, like the Danny DeVitos of the island world, aren't safe either. The thing is that small volcanic islands only seem stable because of their small mass. It's like Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger both slipping on the ice. Arnie's fall might cause more chaos, but Danny can still go flying. And those little collapses? Yes, they matter. Take Santa Maria, a tiny island that's about 170 times smaller than Hawaii. It has collapsed multiple times, not because it wanted to, but because it's basically standing on soggy breadcrumbs. Its foundation is loose marine sediment, And to make things worse, it's sitting right next to the East Azores Fault, where 3 tectonic plates meet up for daily slap fights. This fault is responsible for many earthquakes and even some tsunamis that happened in Lisbon in the past, so you can imagine what it's like living right above it. Every time the volcano in Santa Maria erupts and grows, it also sinks. But when a chunk collapses, it bounces back up like a buoy. This seamount to island again roller coaster means that Santa Maria has popped in and out of the ocean like a submarine playing peekaboo, and with every peak comes a potential tsunami. Another volcano with similar trust issues is Pacaya, located in Guatemala. Between 2011 and 2013, scientists spotted strange movements in the soil, tiny shifts that suggested something underneath was getting restless. Sure enough, in 2014, Pacaya erupted. Luckily, it didn't collapse, but that risk still looms, especially if magma gets trapped in it like it did with Fogo. The consequences could be explosive, literally. In fact, about 1,000 years ago, Pacaya experienced a collapse that sent debris avalanches more than 15 miles away. Since then, it's rebuilt itself like a fiery phoenix, but it could still crumble again. That's why volcanologists obsess over the tiniest wobbles. It's not paranoia if the mountain really might fall. Now you might be thinking here, okay, but that was the past. Surely that kind of ridiculous mega tsunami collapse can't happen again, right? Well, welcome to the 21st century. Islands like Hawaii, La Palma in Spain, and various parts of the Caribbean are sitting on the same kind of geological whoopee cushions. All it takes is the right combo: loose foundation, steep slopes, maybe some trapped magma, and boom, flank collapse. In fact, it's already happened recently. In 2018, Anak Krakatau, the volcanic baby of the infamous Krakatoa, lost a big chunk of itself during an eruption. It caused a tsunami, but it was more awkward than devastating, like a volcano losing its pants on stage. Embarrassing, but survivable. But that's just amateur hour compared to history's real showstoppers. Ritter Island's 1888 collapse was so intense that the island literally got shorter. It went from being more than 2,000 feet tall to a mere 460 feet. But the record holder is the legendary Latua Bay megasplash from 1958, where a 7.8 magnitude earthquake triggered a massive landslide that sent a wave taller than the Empire State Building roaring through Alaska at highway speeds. Strangely enough, only 5 people lost their lives here, but on the other hand, the destruction path it left behind can still be seen today, all the way from space. Melting glaciers and ice caps can make volcanoes collapse too. When they melt, there's a sudden decrease in pressure on Earth's crust that can destabilize entire volcanoes. It's called isostatic rebound. It's like suddenly yanking a chair out from under someone who's been sitting still for centuries. Whoops. Also, here's something you probably never thought you'd worry about on your island getaway. Some volcanic islands grow outward as lava pours into the sea, creating unstable platforms known as lava deltas. These deltas can collapse without warning, taking newly formed land, and sometimes tourists too, right back into the ocean. No pressure though, just thought, maybe you want to stay off steaming new land. So yeah, next time you're lounging on a beachy volcanic island thinking, wow, this place is paradise, just remember, it might also be a ticking geological time bomb with a flair for the dramatic. From ancient mountain-sized cannonballs to surprise lava deltas, volcanoes have a history of keeping things spicy. July 17, 1998. It started like a usual quiet evening in the villages along the north coast of Papua New Guinea. Then, at 5:49 p.m., the ground shook violently. Suddenly, a 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck. It sent shockwaves through the region. Walls cracked, homes trembled, and the earth beneath the villagers' feet shifted and twisted. It lasted for 19 seconds, with a depth of 19 miles, and seemed like a typical earthquake. And while it caused some damage, this wasn't the kind of destruction that screamed doom. So people were tricked. They thought it was over. They didn't know that the worst was still coming. Then some villagers noticed mysterious lights. It began with a flash of red light along the horizon, a streak that looked like fire. It appeared shortly after the initial earthquake, stretching across the northern sky above the ocean. It flared brilliantly, then vanished in an instant. What could it have been? People started speculating whether it's a warning about something or just sunlight reflecting strangely. But just as it disappeared, it was followed by a loud booming sound from the sea. No one knew what that meant, and some villagers went to the beach, curious to scan the views. What they noticed there chilled them to their core. The ocean looked wrong. The water wasn't calm. It churned, bubbled, and boiled in an eerie, unnatural way. That's when they saw it. A massive wave building in the distance, rushing toward them with terrifying speed. Panic spread like wildfire. People climbed trees, pushed boats into the lagoon, hoping to escape the approaching monster. Unfortunately, it was too late. The first wave hit with unimaginable force and swept away entire villages in an instant. The debris was scattered around, trees were uprooted, buildings were displaced up to 160 to 200 feet inland. Even decades later, some of these affected villages can't be accessed by roads. At the same time, another strange phenomenon emerged. Many people described a red glow at the crest of the tsunami, as though the wave carried fire in its peak. They described an eerie glow as the wave approached the shoreline, a deep and unearthly hue, visible even from far-off places like Itape. And this was only the beginning. 2 more waves followed in quick succession. The second one was the most horrifying, from 33 to almost 50 feet high. By the time the ocean finally receded, the coastline was unrecognizable. After the waves had ravaged everything, leaving villages in ruins, the sky put on one final display. Survivors described a yellow or yellow-red glow illuminating the sky over the ocean. One man who survived by climbing up a tree saw the glow lingering over the horizon, stretching toward the direction of Arap and Itape. At Malol, the Sisters of the Mission looked out to the sea and were stunned by the surreal calm of the golden water. It was still as glass and lit by this unearthly glow. The glow was so vivid, it lit up the entire devastated landscape. Luckily, this allowed survivors to begin searching for their missing loved ones. A lot of people believe these lights were supernatural, an omen of sorts. This event ended up being catastrophic, sudden, and unpredictable. The Royal Australian Air Force responded immediately, sending in planes with relief supplies. People started an investigation. What exactly caused this disaster? Turns out, this tsunami wasn't like most others. Tsunami waves are very different from regular ones. We usually imagine huge breaking waves next to the beach. But they might first look like the water is rushing away from the shore. Stay vigilant because this is a warning sign. The water will come back very quickly and rise like a massive tide, often with devastating force. Rarely they come alone. They often arrive in a series, destroying everything along the coastline. They happen when a large amount of water in the ocean or a big lake gets suddenly pushed out of place. The main causes are usually earthquakes, which happen when the Earth's tectonic plates shift suddenly under the ocean. They start lifting or lowering the seafloor, and this pushes the water above it, causing huge waves. This tsunami in Papua New Guinea was completely different though. At first, scientists thought that it was caused by the Australian and Pacific tectonic plates slipping against each other. But it turned out that the earthquake itself wasn't the problem. It really was pretty small. However, it had triggered a massive underwater landslide. When the seabed shifted, it pushed away an insane volume of water. The waves reached almost 50 feet high, like a 4-story building. That's how we realize that even small earthquakes can actually cause massive tsunamis via underwater landslides. What's even worse is that tsunamis like this can happen with little or no warning, simply because the earthquake alarms don't go off. But what about that bubbling and boiling of water that people saw? Turns out, this was the release of underwater gases. Beneath the ocean floor, there are pockets of gas trapped in the sediments. For example, methane, which is often found in oil and gas fields, or hydrogen sulfide, a gas that smells like rotten eggs. During the earthquake, the seabed probably cracked or shifted, releasing these gases into the water. This caused bubbling or boiling. The water might have heated in some areas. People mentioned that the waves felt hot and even stung their skin. The chemicals in it most likely made things even worse, irritating their skin. These gas eruptions might also have played a role in making the tsunami stronger. Maybe they were the ones that loosened the sediments that caused the underwater landslide, or pushed the water up when the gas escaped. It's like shaking up a bottle of soda. If the pressure releases suddenly, it causes a huge reaction. But what about the strange lights? Well, that's more complicated. There's a phenomenon called earthquake lights. They happen all around the world, flashes, glows, or aurora-like effects. Although they're usually white, bluish, or even multicolored. Sometimes these lights last seconds, sometimes up to tens of minutes, at any point in an earthquake. If we go by their description, then the first red flash could have happened because of electricity. Earth's crust is full of quartz and similar stuff that can release electricity under pressure. When the earthquake shook the ground, all that electricity traveled up into the air. Gases from before could have helped here. They could ignite or interact with charged particles in the air, making the lights even brighter. As the wave continued to churn up sand, rocks, and debris, the intense pressure and movement could have released more sparks. This could cause the fire-like lights at the wave's crest that people noticed. Finally, the yellow light could have been all these electricized gases rising into the atmosphere. Methane and other gases interacted with Earth's magnetic field and created something like aurora borealis. But these are all speculations. The most heartbreaking part of the story is that tragedy in Papua New Guinea was preventable. Scientists knew the tsunami was coming, though it arrived earlier than they expected. The first wave struck between 10 and 25 minutes after the earthquake, about 5 minutes earlier than models showed. That means that it started somewhere close to the shore. The reason no one evacuated in time was simple. Local people didn't have a tsunami warning system or even enough knowledge about tsunamis to understand that an earthquake might lead to one, or why the water was acting weird. Things like that haven't happened in Papua New Guinea in over 60 years. But this was a wake-up call. From this immense tragedy came lessons and resilience. A year after the disaster, all the surviving locals watched a documentary that explained what had happened and taught them what to do if it ever happened again. This effort saved lives because the story did happen again. A similar earthquake and tsunami struck the nearby island of Vanuatu in November 1999. But this time, the villagers were ready. They remembered what they had seen in the film. Instead of panic, they acted quickly, and luckily, hundreds of lives were saved. Now, tsunami warning systems are everywhere in developed areas. They can send alerts to people via sirens, text messages, or broadcasts as soon as a potential tsunami is detected. A tsunami hitting major cities on or near the Mediterranean Sea and in the northeastern part of the Atlantic Ocean is not a matter of if, but when. It is scary and surreal to think that places like Cannes or Barcelona could suddenly get slammed by a huge wave. But the fact is, European coastlines are in active tectonic areas. Only about 10% of all tsunamis worldwide happen in the Mediterranean, And there have been at least 290 tsunamis in this area since 1600, before Common Era. Despite the relatively low number, this phenomenon has caused numerous devastating disasters throughout Europe's history. Back in 1755, an estimated 8.5 magnitude earthquake, with an epicenter southwest of Cape St. Vincent, triggered a tsunami that destroyed most of Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. About 40 minutes after the earthquake, this massive wave just slammed into the harbor in downtown, racing up the Tagus River. The phenomenon was so fast that several people on horseback had to gallop to higher ground to avoid getting carried away. And this was just the beginning of a nightmare, with 2 more terrifying waves hitting Lisbon right after. A disaster like this is similar to what we see in the Pacific Ocean several times a century, but in the Atlantic, it's very rare. This type of major tsunami is expected to happen every 3 to 5 centuries, but now it could happen tomorrow. Marseille in France, Chipion in Spain, and other cities are on the list of important locations that could be flooded soon, with a roughly 100% chance of being hit by a tsunami in the next 30 years. Statistics show that the wave will probably be more than 3 feet high. I know, it doesn't sound like much, especially since when we think about tsunamis, we imagine terrifyingly tall waves, like the one that hit Lituya Bay in Alaska. In that case, the wave was over 1,700 feet tall. But we must remember that even waves only 19 inches high can be dangerous to swimmers, because it's not the height of the tsunami that matters, but also the flow and movement of the water. Not to mention the flooding, which can damage beaches, harbors, and streets. If the coastline has a small harbor and the waterfront is exceptionally low, like Cannes, this natural disaster might be much more dangerous. Tsunamis around 6 feet high can lift cars off the ground, while smaller waves can create walls of water traveling at 40 miles per hour. Plus, there are these smaller events that might not wreck everything, but still can cost a ton of money. For example, large sandbars that move around on the ocean floor, like sand dunes shifting in deserts. They can mess up pipelines or deep-sea cables for internet and communications, and that ends up costing businesses and governments millions of dollars. That's why organizations like UNESCO are worried about the possibility of a dangerous tsunami hitting Europe soon. So they're doing everything they can to prevent apocalyptic scenarios, like what happened in 2004 when an earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia, caused waves over 100 feet high in coastal communities, resulting in over 200,000 lives lost. And let's not forget about 2011, when an earthquake off the coast of Tohoku, Japan, triggered a tsunami that reached about 6 miles inland and caused a major nuclear accident at a power station along the coast. Over 16,000 people lost their lives in that tragedy, and the event resulted in billions of dollars in infrastructure damage. These disasters were huge wake-up calls, and we've come a long way since 2004. We're much safer today, largely because the tsunami warning system is highly effective at quickly detecting this dangerous situation. Unlike many other natural phenomena, a tsunami can be anticipated. We may only have a few minutes to act, but if we all know what to do, many lives can be saved. And in most parts of the world, sirens are commonly used to alert people to tsunamis. To sound the siren as early as possible, initial tsunami alerts usually rely only on seismic data. First, specialists receive information about an earthquake. Seismic waves travel about 100 times faster than tsunamis, so they have enough time to analyze the data and see if the earthquake might have generated a tsunami and whether they should issue an initial tsunami alert. At U.S. warning centers, for example, scientists typically issue initial alerts within 5 minutes of an earthquake. If a tsunami is suspected, these alerts may also include information about wave arrival times, recommended actions, and potential impacts. But sounding the alarm is not enough. To save lives, coastal communities also need to be trained to respond fast and in the best way possible. That's why UNESCO produced this program called Tsunami Ready, aiming to train people living in coastal areas at risk on how to act in case of a tsunami event by the year 2030. The idea is to help communities stay safe by teaching them how to protect their livelihoods and safeguard their homes. Being recognized as tsunami-ready by UNESCO doesn't mean a community is tsunami-proof, of course. It's more like a recognition that they have adopted all possible measures to mitigate tsunami risks. So authorities are helping communities to prepare themselves by installing evacuation signs, establishing security procedures, and creating plans to warn tourists. Like Spain, which distributed tsunami warning signs along the entire coastline, as well as signs showing evacuation routes to higher ground. And Spain better be prepared. I mean, only 7 tsunamis have hit the country since the year 365, so it's difficult to predict the effects of such an event. But they could be devastating, considering that Spanish coastal areas are so economically important. There's also a danger zone in the Averroes Fault beneath the Barents Sea. If an earthquake happens at this point, people will have only 21 minutes to escape a tsunami. UNESCO has also established 12 tsunami warning centers, which cover Europe as well. This initiative involves 5 centers located in the Mediterranean and Northeast Atlantic regions. These centers can save thousands of lives because they monitor ocean disturbances 24/7. Then, after analyzing the threat, they send out messages based on the event's potential to cause a tsunami. The intensity scale ranges from no effect to completely devastating. And by that, they understand that nearly all brick buildings could be demolished by waves, and even the most reinforced concrete structures could suffer heavy damage. Now, so far, we have mostly talked about tsunamis caused by earthquakes along converging tectonic plate boundaries. In fact, earthquakes have accounted for over 80% of tsunamis since 1900. But tsunamis can also result from landslides, volcanic eruptions, and even meteorite impacts. Experts are also worried that with the current changes in climate, we might see more of meteotsunamis popping up in the Mediterranean. These ones are triggered by freaky weather conditions and can mess with any coastline that's got a shallow seafloor. They might not be as huge or famous as the earthquakes ones, but they can still cause significant property damage and put people in danger. For instance, in 2006, a meteotsunami struck the harbor of Ciutadella on the Spanish island of Menorca. Yachts were tossed into each other and later stranded on the harbor floor as the water receded, resulting in tens of millions of euros in damage. Unfortunately, meteotsunamis in the Mediterranean tend to be stronger during summer, so if you're planning to spend your vacation in Europe, stay alert for any signs of dangerous waves. If you suddenly encounter a tsunami moving in your direction, remember this is the time to react. Move to higher ground as far inland as possible. Pay special attention to any emergency alerts and information, and follow the guidance of local authorities. Most importantly, do not wait around taking photos. Leave the area as soon as you notice any signs of this danger event, or if you hear an official tsunami warning. Hey, stay safe.
A tsunami can travel unnoticed in the deep waters at the speed of 500 miles per hour, crossing an ocean in less than a day. When it approaches land, a tsunami will slow to about 20 miles an hour and begin to grow in height. Most of these waves are less than 10 feet high when they hit land, but they can reach more than 100 feet high, about 2 times as tall as the Hollywood sign. When a tsunami comes ashore, areas less than 25 feet above sea level and within a mile of the sea are in the greatest danger. But sometimes, tsunamis can go 10 miles inland. If you're by the coast and feel a strong earthquake, especially one that lasts for more than 20 seconds, that could be a major red flag that a tsunami is on the way. Keep an eye out for sudden changes in the sea level. If the water suddenly recedes way further back than usual, exposing normally submerged areas, that's a sign that a tsunami might be on its way. Plus, if you hear a roaring sound coming from the ocean, like a freight train or a jet engine, that's another ominous sign. And pay attention to any unusual animal behavior. Animals have been known to sense danger before humans did, so if you see birds or marine life acting strangely, it's time to take notice. If you receive an official tsunami warning from authorities, whether through sirens, radio, TV, or mobile alerts, don't ignore it. Take immediate action. If you're in a tsunami-prone zone and experience an earthquake, don't even wait for official warnings. As soon as it's safe to move after the shaking stops, head to the nearest elevated area promptly to ensure your safety. Practice evacuation routes before a real disaster. You might have to follow this route at night and in terrible weather. If you know it well, you'll need to do less thinking in an emergency, which can be life-saving. Talk about tsunamis with all your family members. Everyone should know what to do to minimize fear and win some precious time. Don't store your important papers and valuables in low-lying areas. Floodwaters can go really high during a tsunami, so put your documents in waterproof containers on higher ground. After an earthquake, bridges and roads often get damaged or become blocked. Not to get trapped in a car in a potentially hazardous location, walk or run towards safety. Never go down to the shore to watch for a tsunami. If you can see the wave, it means you're too close to outrun it. Most tsunami-prone areas have signs indicating evacuation routes. Look out for white and blue signs marked Tsunami Evacuation Route, or similar instructions to guide you inland and away from danger zones. In urgent situations where evacuation isn't possible, seek refuge on the third floor or higher in a sturdy building. Even better, aim to reach the rooftop of the tallest and most robust structure nearby. It's better than being exposed. A tsunami is not a single wave, but a series of waves with massive amounts of water that can flood for hours. The first wave may not even be the largest. So, remain on high ground, away from the coast until you receive an all clear from the authorities. You're really unlikely to survive a tsunami in a basement below ground level. As it passes over, everything in its wake gets submerged temporarily until the water recedes back to the sea. If you're in a basement during a tsunami, you might get crushed by collapsing buildings or swirling debris. Unless the basement is exceptionally sturdy, waterproof, and equipped with sufficient air supply, it's not a safe option for shelter. If you happen to be out at sea when a tsunami warning is issued for your area, stay put and avoid returning to port immediately. Tsunamis can sneak up on you with rapid water level changes and dangerous currents in harbors and ports, making them unsafe. In large harbors and ports, authorities take charge during tsunami alerts and direct vessel movements for safety. It's important to stay in touch with these authorities and follow any instructions they give regarding moving your vessel. For smaller ports without such organized control, it's a better idea to carefully relocate your boat to deeper waters. If you have a small boat, the best you can do is leave your vessel at the pier and seek higher ground yourself. If a tsunami gets you in the water, find something sturdy like a tree, a door, or a life raft. Grab onto it tightly while you get carried by the waves. Try your best not to swallow any of the water. Tsunamis can pick up chemicals and waste, which won't do you any good. People in life jackets have a higher chance of survival because they will remain on the surface of tsunami waves and can breathe normally. Tsunami waves aren't like ordinary waves, so they aren't suitable for surfing. Tsunamis don't have a face to ride. They're more similar to tides as they rush in and out. They're much larger, faster, and more powerful. So, trying to surf them is not only dangerous but also illegal in many countries. Because tsunamis come from underwater disturbances, like earthquakes, they're even dangerous for submarines. Despite submarines' robust design to withstand underwater pressure, the force of tsunamis can cause damage. Tsunamis also generate strong currents that can mess up a submarine's ability to navigate effectively. In cases of severe tsunamis, submarines may get hull damage, threatening their buoyancy and integrity. Such scenarios can lead to submarines sinking or being carried away by the waves. That's why submarines operating in tsunami-prone areas must be extra careful and equipped to respond swiftly if this sea monster strikes. Scientists still can't predict tsunamis, but they can use their expertise in seismology and historical tsunami data to identify earthquakes likely to trigger tsunamis and issue warnings. They gather crucial data from seismic and water level networks worldwide, which enables them to swiftly assess earthquake characteristics such as magnitude, location, and depth. Utilizing this information, they determine whether an earthquake has the potential to generate a tsunami and decide on issuing tsunami advisories. For regions like the US and Canada, warning center scientists can typically issue preliminary messages within 5 minutes of an earthquake. These messages include alert levels, earthquake details, threat evaluations, anticipated wave arrival times, recommended actions, and potential impacts. On the 26th of December 2004, early in the morning, an enormous earthquake shook up the ocean floor near the Indonesian island of Sumatra. This seismic event unleashed a monstrous series of waves, tsunamis, that spread out across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as East Africa over the next 7 hours. These waves were towering walls of water, some reaching a height of over 30 feet. When they slammed into the coastlines of countries like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, Maldives, and Thailand, the devastation was catastrophic. Over 200,000 people lost their lives in this most devastating tsunami on record. And it wasn't just the immediate impact. Long-term consequences hit hard too. Villages, resorts, farmlands, and fishing areas were destroyed or submerged in salt water along with debris. Japan is one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the world because it's located on top of 4 converging tectonic plates that constantly interact with each other. After a terrible tsunami in 2011, the country started a colossal project dubbed the Great Wall of Japan. With a jaw-dropping price tag of around $13 billion, this wall goes from the north to the south of the country. The goal is to safeguard coastal towns from future tsunamis, buying its people precious time to save themselves. Some locals worry that this towering structure will sever their deep-rooted ties with the sea. They fear losing touch with the ocean's rhythms and cues, which are crucial for spotting upcoming disasters. But for many coastal towns, the wall is a lifeline, giving them hope for rebuilding shattered lives post-disaster.